Okay, so we will now look at a few more tests that can be used to prove congruency. Now you recall earlier on we have learned the side test, whereby when three sides of a triangle are known, okay, you can use it to prove that the two triangles are congruent. The other test that we have used is SAS, whereby you have two sides and the angle in between. Okay, the next one we're going to look at is the angle side angle test. And this is used when you have two angles and one side. And the side has to be the included side. Now, what does the included side mean? Okay, look at this triangle here. Now, you have two angles here. And you realize that the side that is included is where, okay, the two angles actually fall on this side. This is what we mean by the included side. Okay, so if you have two angles and the side where the two angles fall on, and you find that they are both the same, then you can say that the two triangles are congruent. So again, how do we prove it in this case? We want to prove it by angle side angle. So we can prove that angle H is equals to angle W. Alright, this is your A. And HJ is equals to WX is equals to 5 cm. This is your side. And okay, angle J is equals to angle X is equals to 30 degrees. So this gives you your A. And therefore, you can prove that triangle HGJ is congruent to triangle WVX. Okay, we have to make sure that the sides correspond. H, in this case here, you see, I got it wrong already. In fact, H actually doesn't correspond to W. H is 30 degrees, actually corresponds to X. And J, which is 50 degrees, actually corresponds to, okay, W. So if this is the case, then over here, correspondingly, okay, see, H must correspond to X. So I know this must correspond to X. Alright, and then G must correspond to V, and J, which is 50 degrees, must correspond to W. And we can prove this by the ASA. So again, the order is very important, okay, the correspondence, and of course, the reason. Okay, so this is a new test for us, okay, the angle side angle test. Now we're going to look at two more tests. Okay, so far, just recall, we have the side test, we have the side angle side test, and we have the angle side angle test. Okay, the next test we're going to look at is the angle side test. And this happens when you have two angles and one side given. And if you have two angles and the one side whereby it is not an included side, remember it's not an included side, are equal, okay, to the corresponding two angles and the corresponding side, then the two angles are congruent. For instance, if you have two triangles given like this here, okay, I would like you to pause the video now and just draw these two triangles. Alright, and if you are done, okay, let's look at these two triangles. The dimensions are not given, but if we want to remember, our aim here is to prove it using angle side. Alright, so we can prove that angle B is equals to angle D. This is given, and this gives us the first angle. The next angle, angle C, is equals to angle F. That gives us the second angle. And then the next part, okay, AB will be equals to, okay, so I got to name the side. Now B, I know corresponds to D. So A will therefore corresponds to E. Okay, and this gives us the side. And you realize that this side, okay, is actually not an included side, because if you look at the side here, okay, the side only has one angle falling on it. The other angle doesn't touch this side at all. So remember that for this property, okay, the side cannot be an included side. And once you have this, okay, you can prove that triangle ABC is congruent to, remember we must look at the order, AB corresponds to ED and C corresponds to F. And this is the AAS property. Alright, so far we've learned triple S, okay, we have learned SAS, we have learned ASA, and we have learned AAS. Okay, these are the 4 ways to prove congruency. And the last and final way, okay, that looks a little bit different, is what we call the right angle hypotenuse side test. And this happens when you have a right angle triangle and one hypotenuse and a side given. That's what it shows in the name, okay, RHS. So for instance, if you look at this case here, okay, if I have a right angle, for instance, over here, angle P is equals to angle S is equals to 90 degrees. Okay, this is my R because this is my right angle. Okay, I have my hypotenuse. Remember what is hypotenuse? Hypotenuse is the longest side of the triangle opposite the right angle. So I look at the side of the triangle opposite the right angle. Okay, I have NQ and I want to find the correct corresponding side. So how do I decide? Now look at Q. Okay, maybe look at Q is easier. Q is between the 5 cm and the 3 cm side. So correspondingly, if I look at the side which corresponds to the intersection of the 5 cm and 3 cm, that's R. So I know Q must correspond to R. And therefore N must correspond to T. And this is my hypotenuse. And another side that's given, okay, is QP is equals to, remember, Q must correspond to R. So I know it must be R something. Okay, so QP is 3 cm. And I know RS is also equals to 3 cm. And therefore you have your side. And with this, you can then prove that triangle, okay, NPQ is congruent to triangle. Remember, let's do the corresponding side. N corresponds to T, P corresponds to S, Q corresponds to R. Okay, T as R, and the reason is RHS, right angle hypotenuse side. Right, so in summary, you see that we have learned, okay, 5 conditions for congruent triangle. The first condition happens when you have 3 sides given to you, triple S. Okay, second one is when you have 2 sides plus 1 included angle. Okay, angle side angle is when you have 2 angles and 1 included side. Okay, angle side is, okay, different from angle side angle because we have 2 angles plus 1. The keyword here is non-included side. And finally, the last one is when you have a right angle triangle with hypotenuse and side. So you will have to memorize all these 5 conditions, okay, because in questions then you have to decide which condition to use. We will do some practice later. Okay, and finally, before we go on to the practice question, please note that these criteria do not prove contingency. So you cannot anyhow invent your own test. Okay, let's move on to your exercise 4.1 worksheet now, and we will do some practice questions there.